Hello, and welcome to the Forgotten Manual Tech Edition. I don't know. It's CXI here, and I wanted to talk to you about one of my favorite things. I've talked about in the past, obviously I've talked about this before, but I want to dig a little deeper into it, and that is the world of idle VMs. You remember, I've talked about it before, like powered off VMs make sense, right? You got a VM that's been powered off for a period of time, blah, blah, blah. You go and you delete it, that's easy, right? And I said, snapshots, blah, 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 you check it out, that's easy. Orphan disks, it's a manual process you gotta go and do, blah, 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 right? Those are the normal things I've talked about. Sorry for that cough there. And when I brought up idle VMs, it's always been in the, if a VM shows up inside of your idle VM list, you will want to reduce that CPU count to 1 because it will use, an idle VM is defined as, I'm going to show you, I'm going to click on settings here. An idle VM is a VM which consumes 100 megahertz of CPU for 100% of the time. The time is defined as idle for at least 7 days and provision over 30 days. And I have had environments where this number is idle for at least 90 days. However you have that specified, whatever, right? The point is, an idle VM is using less than 100 megahertz. So when we look at that from a, getting into the weeds standpoint, I'm gonna pick this one here, this whatever proxy, which I have open on another tab. I have open on another tab because it made it easier for me. This today has 4 vCPU. And you know that if we were to be using the Rightsizing automation tool, Automation Central, it can only do things at 50% thresholds, which means we can only take it from 4 CPU to 2 vCPU, and then we do it again, and it goes from 2 to 1. Same kind of thing, these 8s would go 8 to 4, 4 to 2, 2 to 1. So anything that shows up here inside of idle VMs, you could feel comfortable saying, hey, that VM can be reduced to a single CPU, but if you want to prove that, let's go pop into that VM itself. We pull up in here, we're going to go pop into metrics, something you can do for all of your VMs you want. We're going to go type in idle, just because I want to. Right? And we're going to go and look at the idleness indicator, idleness information, and then we're going to go throw demand. Demand megahertz, not percent, but demand megahertz. And when we go back and look at that particular VM, right, we notice it's been idle for about 198 days, it says. We're going to go and grab the little calendar thingy, and we're going to say, yeah, the last 6 months. There we go, last 6 months. I'm going to hit a little go, and we're going to say, hey, sometime, how long ago was that? 198 days? Sometime here, about 198 days ago, we defined this as reclaimable as idle because it had been idle, e.g. under 100 megahertz for that period of time. And as we look back at this, when this virtual machine was born, back on January 9th, that's when this VM was born, it consumed 715 megahertz at the time. And then after that point, it has been under 100 megahertz always. So we pop back over that first tab. As I look at this VM here, this vRCSM proxy that has 4 CPUs allocated to it, I feel kind of comfortable that over the last 198 days, this asset has used less than 100 megahertz. We can back that up. We can look at the data. We just did look at the data. So I feel comfortable saying, you know what? I want to reduce this particular virtual machine down to a single vCPU. Now there's a trick on this. You can't do it directly here inside the idle VMs view because our only options are to delete and power off those VMs. Or exclude, respectively. So in this particular scenario, I would have to go and, I'm going to do it from this tab because I want to. Nope, I guess I'm going to do it from here. In this scenario, I would have to go and click on the actual VM itself, which will bring me in here. And then I can go into my my actions, if I actually had rights, and I'd be able to go and modify it there, right? So that's we're going to pause there for a moment, and I'm going to go bring up an environment where I actually can execute on that part so I can kind of show you. So we're going to go pull in this other admin-focused environment. I am not going to edit this part out. This is the reality of what we face, right? So we're going to go find one of those VMs that we want to right size because I already cleared all the idle VMs in this environment. So we're going to go grab arbitrary VM that's too big just so I can show you the context of that. I'll go click on the VM itself, then I have actions, and then I can go and set the CPU count or memory count. I can go and open that virtual machine, the vROPS client. The key point here is showing you there are actions that I can go and execute for that thing. So I can go and have it, I can go set those particular parameters either directly through this or open up the web client and do it that way. You've got options on how you kind of do it. However, those options do not translate over into optimize, reclaim, idle VMs. You can't do it directly here from the idle VM section. You might be saying, oh, well, it'd be great if there were a feature that could do that. And I literally put the feature request in this morning. So hopefully there will be a feature for that. But at the present, if you have anything showing up in here in your idle VMs, and the route I would suggest is we go and hey, let's go take that and we're going to go hit export all. It'll dump it out into an Excel spreadsheet or CSV, whichever way you want to look at it. And then I can walk through all that data. Anything that is greater than 1, let's drop down to 1. You know, like these ones here, the FD EMEA, the T1 admin that are 1 CPU, that's fine. Whatever, it's 1 CPU, who cares? But these ones that are 2, these ones that are 4, these ones that are 8, yeah, I'm going to go and, you know, drop those ones down because we know it's going to drop all the way down. The alternative to it is we reclassify what that idle VM is to where it'll show inside of our right-sized, oversized VM area, but then it's just going to add extra steps of taking that 4 CPU, dropping it down to 2, then it goes from 2 down to 1. You know, you can just jump that shark immediately here inside of Reclaim and just go and reclassify those assets, reclaim those CPU for those particular assets. Because maybe I can't shut down Vincent 2 Cloud Prox or Staging Acme Cloud Proxy. I can't shut it down, but I know it's only using a single CPU's worth of 100 megahertz or less, so I can go and shut not that asset down, but at least reclaim those additional assets that may be wasted. And that can be one of the benefits you get out of doing this. And maybe I've got some reclaimable memory. Ignore how this says reclaimable memory, because what this means is it wants you to shut that VM down that's idle. Therefore, it wants to reclaim all the memory. So don't worry about what it says reclaimable memory. All I can commit to you is reclaimable CPU. And even after that point, you can always reclassify it over into a non-idle VM, so that way Rightsized can go and resize memory and stuff like that. You know, we can do it by hand just the same as well, right? We'll go same type of thing. We'll grab this Vincent one. We're gonna go look at what we just take a look at. We'll go throw our idleness indicator, reclaimable, blah, blah, blah. We'll throw demand in here. We're doing that demand megahertz just like we had. And then we're going to go and do memory, which is, we'll throw host demand and guest demand in there. And we're going to go and look at the information we have, right? We'll go drop it, I don't know, last 90 days. Wow. Yeah, this one has been, let's see if I can increase that. Maybe last year. I don't remember what the exact date that one had specified is. So, yeah, somewhere around Friday, April 7th, it said, hey, this thing's reclaimable because it's idle. And that backs into this. Hey, here's our idleness, you know, for all those times. This is probably when there was a reboot happening. But as we look at our memory consumption, I could say, hey, pretty much since whatever this date was, April 7th, since about April 7th, April, March, since about then, we've only been using about 2 gigabytes of memory worth. That's what has been what our demand is. The same is true over here. We're using, that's in kilobytes, but it's a lot lower than, you know, 4 or 6 gig worth. So we could probably even reclaim the amount of gigabytes we have allocated to this particular asset. Because what do we have allocated to it is 4. No, that's 4 CPUs, 12 gig of memory. Yeah, I could probably comfortably drop this down to a single CPU and 4 gig of memory. Even though it's only using 2, drop it to 4, right? I feel comfortable with that. That's kind of the skinny on how you can go and hand define those idle assets so that way you can reclaim some of that stuff. Or the other alternative to that happens to be is, if you're like, I don't want to do any of this, I'll just let it do its own thing. Go inside your settings here and say, you know what, an idle VM is something that's only less than 10 megahertz. And then everything that is an idle VM will no longer show up in your idle VM list, unless it's less than 10 megahertz somehow. And it will then pop back over here inside of the oversized VM area. So that way your Automation Central oversized VM job can be the one that can handle that. Here, I'll go grab that for your visibility. That way our Automation Central oversized VM job here, we were able to then have it reclassify those things. Because from an idle VM standpoint, we can only delete or power off at this time. If my feature request gets changed, hey, maybe we'll be able to do more things to it. But regardless, I wanted to take you guys on that little journey today and show you fun things you can do about getting immediate value out of these idle VMs. Not over here. Back over here. There we go. Because again, I reclassify that entire environment. So that way you'll be able to go into the fun here and say, hey, if something is greater than 1 CPU, take it down to 1 CPU. Because you won't have an automation function that will go and do that on your behalf. The best it'll do is try to shut your things down or delete them. And, you know, I can't encourage that because my cloud proxy might be important even if it's not being used. Kind of important to me. My Skyline Health Diagnostics, kind of important to me. My jump box, my TFTP server, my NTP server, my SFTP server, those boxes that don't do anything except for when they do it. I need to keep those things. They're not idle. So, you know, either reclass from idle to oversized, whatever, or just go do it by hand. Either way, you're going to get more value and reclaim more assets that you can use from more of your infrastructure. So hopefully this was helpful and useful. Let us know in the comments, questions, any of that kind of stuff. I'll update a comment in this video if my feature request gets approved. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, subscribe, follow us, blah, blah, blah. We will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.